Okay. Need to silence this. Okay, so I think as it's now gone 7 o'clock, we should start proceedings. So first of all, welcome to the Folkestone Hythe District and Parish Council's joint meeting. The first item of business that we need to undertake is the election of a chair. And at this meeting, as it alternates for each meeting, at this meeting, it's we need to appoint a district councillor. So could I have a volunteer, please, from either two district councillors that are here?
We have to volunteer now, do we?
Or volunteer or be elected or nominated.
I'm happy for Jen to stand as chair.
Thank you.
Okay, that's lovely. And if you're happy, then Councillor Hollingsby, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you, James. Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome. Can I first of all, I'd just like to apologise that for some reason I overlooked the meeting last time, and just thank you to Paul for stepping in and chairing. So thank you, Paul.
I also had a problem that night because I didn't get back from Martin's funeral until too late.
Yes. So neither of us were there then.
No.
Okay, all right, well, let's move on. Are there any apologies for absence?
Yeah, we have one apologies, and that's from Councillor Beals.
Right, thank you. And any declarations of interest? No declarations of interest. The minutes, are they agreed for the last meeting?
Yeah, I'd propose them as a true and accurate record, Jenny.
Thank you, Paul. All those who were here agree?
Agreed.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. So item 5 is the Kent County Council consultation regarding changes to community services. And I think that's Rebecca and Ben. So I don't know, Ben or who's starting?
Good evening. Thank you very much for inviting me along. It's myself. Rebecca is unable to join us this evening, but I do have Stephanie Holt-Castle from KCC with me as well. So thank you very much for the opportunity for inviting us along this evening. I've got a short presentation which I'm going to run through, and then there will be plenty of time for questions and for comments at the end. So I'm going to share screen.
Yeah.
It should just have popped up.
Yes.
Yep.
He says, brilliant, fantastic.
It was there.
Well, it was. It's gone.
Oh, hold on a second. Let me have another try.
And there's an echo.
Try that. There we go. Hopefully that should be sharing now. Has that arrived for you all?
Well, it says sharing, but oh yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Fantastic. So I'm going to start with the kind of overall overarching stuff, the kind of the why and the how behind the program, and then I'll talk about specific proposals as they relate to the Folkestone and Hythe area. I think this usually works if we sort of save questions for the end, but if anyone does have anything absolutely burning, then please stick your hand up and I'll come to you if I can.
Can we just, sorry, Ben, can we just make sure that people have muted themselves at the moment so that we don't get any background noise? Thank you.
Can I just ask before you start, are you going to send us this, your presentation? Are you going to send us all the slides and so on?
Absolutely, yes, absolutely. Because there is a lot contained within the slides, and I'll be honest with you, I can bang on about this for hours. So it's probably best if I provide the slides afterwards so that you can read them through at your own leisure as well.
Yep.
So I'll kick off with the services that are included. So essentially, KCC, we are looking at the portfolio of buildings, our network of buildings that we use to deliver our community services from. So in the scope of this programme, we have our community services for adults with learning disabilities. We have our community learning and skills, that's our adult education service. We have our CYPE open access service, that's our children's centres and our youth hubs. And we have public health provision as it links in already with our children's centres and our youth hubs. And we have our network of council gateways. Really important to say at the outset, KCC was recently awarded transformation status from the Department for Education, which looks at transforming the service itself behind children's centres and youth hubs. And the purpose behind that transformation is to provide an integrated all through sort of 0 to 19 or 25 with SEND service provision, integrated much more closely with other partners like the midwifery service, the health visiting service. That's a piece of work that is ongoing at the council. There's a separate team running that piece of transformation work, very, very closely linked to this piece of work for reasons that will become, if not already, very, very clear. That program is about the what of the service, the what that service actually is. What we're talking about tonight is the where. It's the buildings, it's the physical infrastructure, and where that service is delivered from. So we'll talk a little bit about time frame to begin with, and the sort of the journey that we're on. So we started our public consultation on the 17th of January. I think at last count, this evening is, I think, the team's 72nd or 73rd meeting, briefing, workshop throughout the programme period. So we've been fairly busy. The consultation closes on the 26th of March. So there's a little bit of time, left in the consultation. And then we have a period of 2 months between sort of April and May into June, where we will be looking at all the feedback we've received, running through that in detail, and then looking at how we need to revise the proposals, what changes we need to make to the proposals before heading into our cabinet committee process, our formal governance process in sort of June time, and then targeting a cabinet decision in July. We would not anticipate any changes being made, regardless of what the cabinet decision looks like. We wouldn't anticipate any changes being made until early 2024 at the very earliest, and there is probably a couple of years worth of implementation time once we do start making changes. So none of this is going to happen all in one go overnight. There is going to be a long period of implementation once we get past our decision. I'm going to talk a little bit about why, so the rationale behind the programme. Now, KCC has a huge portfolio of buildings, a very large physical estate. We have high and rising costs around running and maintaining those buildings. I'm sure everyone here will have seen sort of the press coverage around not just KCC but local government finance, and obviously you'll all understand that yourselves from your own perspectives. So KCC is looking to how it needs to balance its budgets, how it needs to work differently to balance the books. We do have our net zero 2030 obligations, and part of this work feeds into that as well. And then the sort of underpinning point at the bottom there is making sure that we are providing the right services in the right locations for our residents. There's a couple of things that we could have sort of a couple of courses of action we could have pursued to meet some of those challenges. For instance, we could have there's an echo there.
I think Graham's trying to get in twice. Graham.
I think the echo's gone. Apologies. I don't mind the disruption because it gives me a chance to have a mouthful of tea. go. So there's a couple of things, a couple of courses of action we could have taken. We could have chosen to identify our most expensive buildings to run and propose closure of those buildings. We haven't chosen to do that. We could have chosen to identify our most environmentally inefficient buildings, or the buildings that would generate the highest sale value. But we haven't done those. What we have done, and I'll come on to this in a lot more detail shortly, is try to put an understanding of need for our services at the very heart of the process. Very briefly, in terms of the draft proposals that are out to consultation at the moment, were those proposals the route forward? We would anticipate savings of up to £6.9 million on our revenue budget, a reduction in maintenance liability of £7.3 million. I think there was a fair amount of press coverage around the launch of the consultation, where it was quoted that there was £165 million of backlog maintenance on the KCC estate. That is our entire estate. In terms of the buildings in the scope of this programme, the backlog maintenance figure is around £42 million. So we are predicting reducing that by about £7.3 million as a result of the draft proposals. We are anticipating about £7.5 million in terms of capital receipts generated by the disposal of assets, the sale of buildings, and a 22% reduction in our carbon emissions as a linked to those buildings in the scope of the programme. So I've told you what we didn't do. I've told you the alternative options that were not pursued. And I mentioned that we tried to put need at the heart of our process. The sort of 5 or so bullet points on the page there, they represent probably about 9 or 10 months worth of work, and I'm going to talk you through that process now. To kick off, I think it's fair to say that whilst I absolutely passionately believe that putting need for services at the heart of this process is the right way to go about this. It's the right tool to use. What we're not saying is that we've got this right yet. And whilst it is, it is a tool to use, it's not a perfect tool, and I'll come on to some of the reasons why shortly. But essentially, to try and get a build an understanding of need for services, we started with a few layers of data: indices of multiple deprivation, transport accessibility, broadband accessibility, demographic trends, population growth over the next 20, 30 years, to try and build an understanding of the character of our communities and where the need for services was likely to be the highest. We looked at that data at the ward level for every ward in the county. We felt very, very quickly that it would not be detailed enough to look at the borough, the district level. So we looked at every ward in the county, and we built up a picture using that data of where we felt the highest need for services, comparatively speaking, was. And what you can see there as an example on the right hand side of the page, that's Ashford district as an example, and very broadly, the deeper shade of blue, the greater the level of need, as indicated by that data. What we did then, that was a deliberately a very data-led, evidence-led exercise. We took that data and we took our interpretation of it back to the services in scope, and we asked them, have we got this right? Are we way off? Does this reflect what you see as you deliver your services on the ground day in, day out? Largely, we were told, yes, actually, we kind of recognise what you're showing us there. And at that point, we invited the services to input their own data sets into the model. So that's where, for instance, the children's services provided a lot of data around their reach to vulnerable families. That's where we got usage data from all of the services in scope, and we sort of put that into our model, and that developed our understanding of need. Really important to say that there is no area in Kent where there is no need for our services. It is very much a sliding scale of comparatively higher and comparatively lower need for services. So we ended up with our need map. At that point, we sort of overlaid our existing property portfolio onto that map, and we started talking about where there are areas of high need, where there are wards with the highest need. Do we have buildings in that ward? Do we have buildings in the neighbouring ward that is easily accessible from the ward with higher need? Do we have buildings in easily accessible locations generally, town centres, close to facilities that that residents might seek to go to anyway? We started asking about the suitability of buildings, whether buildings required adaptation to enable co-location of more than one service in that building. Were our buildings accessible from a sort of a physical disability standpoint as well? So we started having that conversation, and at this point, when we had our need map and we had our sort of overlay of buildings, it became a really iterative process with the services in scope, where we would review the data, suggest an arrangement, talk that through with the services, make changes, talk it through again, make changes again. And that's what I mean when I say that the kind of putting need at the center of this, whilst I absolutely believe is the right way to start this conversation, it's not a perfect tool. It became iterative. It became a conversation between the service experts and the program team to come up with the proposals, which are now out to consultation. I'm going to talk now a little bit very briefly about the overall Kent-wide picture, and then I'm going to move on to talking about the Folkestone and Hythe specific services. So what you can see on the slide here is essentially the services in scope on the left, the number of current building locations used by that service, the proposed locations they will have as part of the draft arrangement, the number of proposed exits, proposed closures per service, and then the number of co-locations suggested, so where we are proposing to co-locate that service with other services in the scope of the programme. One piece of work we've done alongside that sort of physical building modelling is some transport modelling. Now, again, this is a tool. It is a snapshot in time. So this demonstrates that 94% of Kent households will be within 30 minutes travel time of at least one of the buildings in the scope of this programme, using public transport, buses and trains. I think this is based off of an outward journey on a Tuesday morning in terms of the timetable used. And what has, I'm going to pause here to talk a little bit about the consultation, because this is a good way of leading me into some of the most helpful feedback that we have been and continue to receive through the consultation. It's fair to say, and I'm sure you will recognise this yourselves, that just because a bus timetable says a bus is turning up at that particular time, doesn't actually mean that bus is turning up when you expect it. So getting a sense in the feedback from residents and from partners of where the lived experience, the reality on the ground, does not necessarily match up to the data or the evidence that we're using to build this model is really, really helpful feedback for us. Understanding whether there's a contradiction between the lived experience and the data we're using is really helpful feedback. So I will come back to that again at the end. I'm going to talk now about the Folkestone and Hythe proposals. And this is where I start to throw a lot of information at you very quickly. So please, don't worry. I will absolutely make sure you have these slides, and all of this information is available on our consultation website. So the buildings that we are proposing to deliver services from in Folkestone and Hythe, we are proposing the new family hub model. So that's that integrated all through 0 to 19. 25 with SEN service. That family hub model we're proposing to deliver from the Caterpillars Children's Centre, the Village Children's Centre, Folkestone Early Years Centre, and the new Romney Children's Centre. We would look to retain the Bridge Resource Centre and Phase 2 for our community services for adults with learning disabilities. And we would look to retain the Cube Pottery for our adult education service. Moving on. Now, for clarity, this slide has been misinterpreted in other sessions as buildings we're proposing to sort of
the sound coming from Ben.
Oh, hold on. Let me try something.
Am I mad?
I can hear you
I think
okay.
we can hear all right, Terry. At least I think we can.
Yeah, I think it's okay for most people.
Terry unmuted.
Can you hear now, Terry? No. Have you muted something? Do you want to go out and try again, Terry? I think we might continue if Terry can't hear.
I'm not sure I can hear Ben at the moment.
Ben's muted. Is he? No.
Ben, are you there? Well, perhaps he's not. Perhaps he's had to.
Are you able to? Can you hear me now?
Yep,
Yes.
perfect.
Terry, can you hear? No.
Doesn't look like it.
No.
Okay, I'll continue on. It's
Yes.
being recorded. I was just saying this slide has been misinterpreted in some sessions as buildings we're proposing to leave alone, not change. So for absolute clarity, this is buildings that we are proposing to leave, remove our services from, buildings we're proposing to close in the area. So we would essentially move the youth provision in 5, formerly known as the Shepway Youth Hub. We would move
nothing. The screen's on, but no, it's just gone totally.
I think it must be your end, Terry, because we can all hear here. Is it worth you going out and coming in again, trying it to come in again?
I think
Because we're carrying on at the moment, Terry.
I don't know if it's worth.
Sorry, Ben. I think you need to carry on.
It might be worth someone sending them a message on chat, on the call chat, if you can't hear us. So we would essentially be moving the youth provision from the 5 centre into the Folkestone Early Years Centre as part of that all through Family Hub provision. We're proposing to close or take our services out of the Hawkins Children's Centre, the Dymchurch Children's Centre and the Little Stars Children's Centre. And we are proposing to take our service out of the Folkestone Sports Centre for adults with learning disabilities. I'm going to move on to talk sort of a few principles around the service mix. So what I'm hoping is clear we are not saying is that we don't need buildings anymore. We're absolutely not saying that. It's about making sure we're making the best use of the buildings available to us, and where possible, where the need sort of analysis shows us, co-locating services together in buildings where that's safe and appropriate to do so. Now, some of our buildings may require some adaptation to enable that to happen, to enable the required safeguarding in those locations. But co-location of services is something that we already do across the county. It's grown organically across the county, and it's about a slightly more strategic approach to that co-location. But it's nothing we don't do already, and we're working very closely with the services in the scope to determine how to co-locate services safely, appropriately, given the in some circumstances the sort of vulnerable nature of the service users accessing that service. I want to talk about outreach provision a little bit, and this can mean all sorts of different things, from sort of detached youth work to home visits for new mums, to essentially a full range of KCC services, but delivered from other partners' buildings if they're better located or more sensibly located for a particular community. Now, in our consultation document, you may well see that where we are proposing the closure of a building, we have listed the nearest alternative physical location. What we are not saying there is, therefore, that is a journey we are going to ask you to make. And indeed, we've already had feedback from some county councillors from the Folkestone area saying that just the nature of communities or the nature of the bus services, residents are not going to travel from part A to part B to access a different building, and we absolutely accept that. And actually, we're not necessarily asking them to. That's where an outreach offer comes in. There's an automatic assumption of my own when I started working on this, which was quite simply area of high need equals permanent physical building. And actually, a lot of the time that is the case, but there are certain types of need, certain characters of need, where there are high need areas where actually it doesn't matter if a KCC branded building is at the end of someone's driveway, they're not going to go to that building, be that through suspicion, stigma, all sorts of reasons. And so actually the best way of reaching that community is to not require them to come to us in the first place. We will go to them wherever that is, whatever that looks like. And another part of feedback that has been really rich, really helpful throughout this consultation process has been hearing from residents what good outreach would need to look like, what good outreach would need to look like and feel like, so that they're reassured they continue to get the service they need, even if it isn't from a KCC branded building. And indeed, one of my program team has spent the last 48 hours talking on the phone to residents who use the Little Stars, the LID Children's Centre. And part of the feedback they have received was, actually, we don't really care if it's a KCC building we're getting the service in. What we care about is getting that service. So part of the feedback we're collating is, where are the opportunities to deliver outreach service from? So that's all I'll say on outreach. It's something that we do a lot of already, and indeed the financial model that sits behind this draft set of proposals includes just north of £4 million reinvested to build our outreach capacity for precisely that reason. I could talk a little bit about digital just finally. Kent as a whole, as a massive overgeneralization, enjoys reasonably good broadband speeds comparatively, and an empowered and enabled set of residents when it comes to accessing online services, online content. That may be the generalization, but that should not mask the fact that there are pockets of real digital exclusion, really poor broadband speeds across the county, in particular sort of rural coastal areas is a prime example of where we see that a fair amount. And there are programs of activity within KCC looking at addressing digital exclusion as well. So what we are not saying is that a website is the answer to all our problems. Absolutely it is not. What we are saying is it's a good idea to develop our online platform, develop our digital offer, so that for residents for whom it is appropriate and for whom it is an option, it is another option for service access. I'm going to come back to this slide in a second. This is, I'm kind of winding up now, you'll be delighted to hear. The consultation website is there. The website has all of our consultation documents on there. It has all of the data that we've used, broken down by ward for every ward in the county. It has all of our equalities impact assessments. It has our transport modelling, our transport methodology is on there as well, for anyone to scrutinise. It also has our feedback form on there. The feedback form, this is a big and complex programme. As such, the consultation document and the feedback form are big, complex documents, unfortunately. If residents do not wish to sit and go through the feedback form, they are absolutely entitled to just send us an email with their thoughts if they find that easier. Also, there are residents who we know are not particularly confident with written feedback. We have a voicemail box, a phone line where residents can call and leave us a voicemail message with their feedback if they wish. All of the details for that are on that consultation website. We have also, what this slide was just setting out, we have also had a couple of drop-in sessions in the area for residents, for members of the public, partners to come and talk to us. And as I referenced earlier, we've been talking directly to service users in some of the centres as well. That's mercifully the end of the slideshow. So I'm more than happy to open up for questions, for comments, and I'm keen to kind of hear specific pieces of feedback as well that I can take back to the team. Thank you very much.
Lovely. Thank you very much indeed, Ben. That's very interesting. I think actually it's a third time that I've heard a presentation on this, so I think I've got a good understanding. Can I just perhaps start off with just a couple of questions? The £4 million that's been talked about, that is just for the Folkestone and Hythe district area, is it not?
Sorry, the
£4 million for reinvestment.
No, so that's county-wide. Sorry,
that's what I thought. So it would be quite a small percentage. And the other thing is, although I'm not a Marsh councillor, I've spent a lot as a district councillor. We represent the whole area. I was very concerned initially about the closure of the Dymchurch and the Lydd nursery schools. However, I do understand that they were not utilised as much as perhaps they should have been or could have been with the facilities that are available. My question, I suppose, is, and I'm sure that's probably where some of the comments have come from, you know, travelling from Lydd to New Romney or Dymchurch to New Romney is not the easiest of journeys in the world. And so I'm wondering if, and I think my lead officer, I think in the next couple of days, is what other, you know, could you be looking at other buildings that you might be able to share those facilities, and that would, you know, in fact help other organisations as well in terms of their cost?
That's I mean, the short answer is absolutely yes. I think it's interesting you mentioned the Lydd to Romney, because I had a couple of sessions on the phone with Councillor Tony Hills, who used that precise example with me, and actually has provided me some suggestions in terms of alternative locations, alternative buildings, and organisations for us to contact at the right time to see if there are opportunities for sharing facilities.
Yes, thank you very much. Because I just think in terms of the outreach, it would be quite focused, and again, actually letting people know, and actually people being able to use that outreach service at a time that suits them may not be possible. Thank you for that. Right, I can see Paul's has a question.
Okay, thank you very much, Jenny. Yeah, if I may, just a couple of things on digital, Ben. As someone who lives in one of those areas that isn't covered particularly well by broadband, and I'm sure some of the other councillors on the marsh should say exactly the same thing. It does worry me slightly. One of the things that Folkestone Hythe District Council did a few years ago was to open my account, which gave a direct line between residents and access to information, so they could actually share, and they could find out things that concern them directly about council tax services, waste collections, all that kind of stuff. Is there any proposal from KCC, because there won't be another direct contact, to put in place something like a My Account, so that KCC residents from across the patch will have an opportunity to have this direct line in, other than having to trouble you with phoning up and trying to find out who best do we have to talk to, and then going on to one of your, well, there are many systems, aren't there, for reporting faults and other things as well. So for me, rationalisation of all of those and having a single front end to deal with would be a really good way of moving forward.
Yeah, frankly, Paul, you've absolutely hit on one of the key themes of that kind of digital, I'll use a grand word, but digital transformation. We have countless different websites, countless different platforms for residents to use. It's confusing enough as it is, and actually one of the best things that we can do, and there is a specific team at KCC looking at precisely that issue. How can we deliver essentially a single point of view, single platform? Far easier to say than do, for all sorts of reasons that are far too technical for me to actually understand. But you've absolutely nailed the ambition that we have with your question there. That's exactly what we're looking to do.
And along the same line, if I may, and the same thing with people working from home, having a suitable platform and methodology of being able to make sure that they understand how do they share information if they're not in the same office, and how do they make sure they get the priorities right and progress things in a way which meets the needs of the residents of Kent. I think that's essential, actually.
Yeah, and you've picked up on a good point there, which leads me on to sort of what I see as the kind of potential big win from this entire piece of work. Now, KCC has a short-term decision to make around its own portfolio to balance its own budgets. That's what this is about in its sort of right now. There is an opportunity, actually, if we agree sort of collectively that an understanding of need is a good way of mapping services. Need changes, it's transient as demographics change and housing is built and development happens. So what sort of conversation and how can KCC, district partners, health partners, police, voluntary sector, how can we collectively have a conversation where we map need together, share information, and effectively, for want of a better phrase, pool our resources to say, we can see this is happening. We can see there is a need generated over here that wasn't there yesterday. How are we going to work together to meet that? Whose building can we use to deliver a service from? That's the kind of conversation. That's the big win that we could get. It's a lovely idea, and it's but that's essentially what I think the opportunity could be.
Okay, and just one final one, if I may. You talked about making sure that when you did the analysis, were you looking at where you were providing need and where you were proposing to, remove the service and close the buildings, and you talked about public transport. Is there then going to be some kind of flag on particular services? I'm thinking particularly rural services, and I'm thinking particularly on Romney Marsh, where, in the future, if there's a discussion about reduction in funding for certain services, but travel services, bus services, then, there's a level of protection given to make sure that what you're trying to deliver now can be supported by the transport system as it is, and we don't exacerbate the problem in the future by having a very much reduced bus service, worse than it is already on Romney Marsh?
Yeah, it's a fair question. Some of the feedback we've had, it's fair to say, has been around transport accessibility, cuts to buses. I can't talk with any confidence about future bus plans, particularly because obviously corporate providers aren't going to share sort of commercially sensitive information with us. What I can say is that we are, as a programme, working reasonably closely with our colleagues in our transport department to kind of map what the future picture looks like. And in terms of that, again, I come back to my answer from the previous question, which was that ongoing conversation, so that essentially, if we get it right, it's not just KCC making these decisions in isolation. It's working with partners who understand the lived experience, the reality on the ground, despite what the spreadsheets and the evidence may suggest. So yeah, I think that's the opportunity.
Okay, no, thank you very much, Ben. Thank you for your answers.
Thank you. Thank you, Ben. I was just going to say, well, I really welcome your comments about my account, Paul. It's something I keep banging on about, and I understand at this moment there's over 70% of residents in the district who have actually signed up. So that's great. And yeah, and if you want to look at your council tax bill now, it's a really good place to go.
It's the season.
I think Roger had his hand up. Roger? You're muted.
If you don't mind, could you talk to Martin Sweeney first? He's been waving like mad, but he hasn't got a yellow hand.
Oh, right. Okay. Of course. Martin?
Yeah, sorry about that. My hand up button's not working for some reason. Yeah, I just want to, I mean, obviously, Chairman, you've mentioned a lot about LID, and I'm grateful for that, and other councillors. I am massively, really concerned about the people in LID. We're a poor little town as well. You know, our transport system, and I do agree with Paul, is not the best in the world. I also think about when you're saying about outreach, and I would like to see a bit more information about that and how it affects how the service would run if we had to go down that road. But I'm really interested with what Tony Hills is saying about sort of spare buildings, etc., etc. So, in my point of view, I am really concerned that we in LID do need some sort of service, and to go even to New Romney is going to be quite a hardship and expense for some people who cannot afford that sort of outlay at this present time. So thank you for the comments, and I'll pass you back.
Thank you very much, Martin. Right, now I think it's over to Roger.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, I've got 3 points as well. I echo what Paul said about the digital thing. I think one of the issues we might have is that particularly a lot of elderly people and people on very low incomes probably are not very happy with using digital, but I think that's just something we've got to somehow overcome. And maybe it's an educational thing, but you know, I don't think we should rely totally on digital communication. That's just a passing point. But I noticed on one of the slides, and I wanted to drill into it a little bit, is that this did not include libraries. When you're talking about your building stock and so on, is that a separate exercise, or are you saying that no libraries are vulnerable at this stage? Ben?
So no libraries. So the library network isn't included in this proposal. That's not actually quite true, and I'll tell you why. Is because we are looking at our library buildings as a whole, where they would be appropriate for co-location of services. So where it is possible to use a library to co-locate other services in, we are looking at our library estate from that perspective. What I can't do is sit here today and say, you know, we will never review our library service. This is the first change to the estate of this scale that KCC has undertaken for about 40 years, and we kind of see this as an ongoing conversation, an ongoing process with our communities, working with our partners around what buildings we have and where. So I think from my perspective, there will be future phases, future work on this, but all I can say with absolute confidence right now is the libraries are not included in these proposals, beyond what I said about co-location.
That's comforting to hear. I'm speaking particularly about Folkestone Library, but in Lyminge also, we would be devastated to lose our library. The only other point that someone touched upon, but this is probably something for the future. I wonder if KCC could look seriously at community bus services. You know, encouraging communities to set up community bus services, and that way we can fill the gaps that the stagecoach providers and all the rest of it, you know, the cuts that we're facing there, we can fill those gaps. It's not something we can fix tomorrow, I know, but maybe it's something which we have in mind. It could be a 5-year rolling program or something like that. So that was my only other point. Thank you, Chair.
No,
Thank you, Roger. Ben.
No, that's helpful. Thank you for that. And I think just on Councillor Sweeney, you made the point, a really fair point, actually, around sort of transport. There's two elements to transport. If and when the bus turns up at what time is one, but when it does turn up, the cost of getting yourself, children, and on the journey is another factor. That's a really good point. Well made. So thank you for that. I've noted that one down as well.
Thank you very much. And I'd just like to add to that, because I did the work experience program for the Marsh Academy for quite a few years, and actually getting students from Lydd to New Romney for work experience was a bit of a job in itself. And as for traveling anywhere else, parents were very, very concerned about even letting their children go any further than New Romney. So again, just something to bear in mind. I think we've got Laszlo next, and then Mike.
Yeah. Hello. Thanks very much, Ben. It was all very impressive stuff. It's a huge amount of work, as everybody will know. I particularly like the consultation process and the feedback that goes back to the residents. The visiting, reaching out to the residents is a bit quirky, but I can think I can get the hang of it, rather than having a central hub. So that I think is a valid point. It is a long road ahead. It's a massive long road ahead, and I don't know how much the time scale was. Could you remind me?
Yeah, absolutely. So the consultation closes on the 26th of March, after which we have a couple of months to sort of comb through the responses we've received, revise the proposals accordingly. We will then present a final option or options for our cabinet committees to consider, and then for our cabinet to make a decision on. We are targeting that decision date currently in probably late July. However, that is dependent on the scale of work required post consultation, but that's what we're targeting at the moment. Beyond
when
that,
is rollout then?
So
when is rollout?
We wouldn't expect any changes to start happening until probably early next year, early 2024 at the earliest. And there will be, because of the requirement to ensure sort of continuity of service delivery, it's probably going to be a good few years of implementation. It's going to take us a long time to do it.
Yeah. And of course, you've got all these agencies that you've got to set all those up and get them bedded in. That's going to take time, and I just wondered about everybody knows it'll take time, but I've just wondered, is there a contingency in the budget for you know, setting up all these discussions and getting everything resolved with the police and other agencies?
So
is there a
I think
contingency? Because I think you'll need a contingency allowance, because I think that bedding in process will take some time.
yeah, I think we are the best. The best thing I can say there is I think we're at the early stages of working with partners around what that needs to look like. So I absolutely accept. I agree with the point you're making. But in terms of quantifying that, I think we're at the earlier stages of working out what the scale of that would need to be in itself at the moment.
It's a
But
learning
it's an
process.
absolutely fair point. Yeah, absolutely.
It's a learning
Absolutely
process.
right.
I mean, we know that. That's why I just wondered, you know, was there a sum involved? Because there's going to be some overrun, I would have thought.
Yeah, that's helpful. I've sort of made a note of that that one as well. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Laszlo and Ben. And Mike.
Yeah, when we built our new village hall in Lymm, we sort of wondered about including a counselling and advice room. So I'm wondering if that couldn't tie with some sort of hybrid outreach system. So it's a room that's got external access, disabled access. It's completely separate from the rest of the village. And our vision was that people that wanted counselling and advice could come along to meet a person at a pre-arranged meeting. And it will be available at the village at certain times. So obviously we own that property, but it will be available for use by others. So it seems to me that meets both things, and it's very local, but it's not actually at the person's home. So this perhaps feels slightly easier, but you know, it's a detached building. They access from the outside. So would that fit into the plans?
Yes, again, the short answer is yes. That's absolutely the sort of opportunity that we want to be looking at, and I think, you know, part of the really rich feedback we're getting is people like yourself telling us, actually, we've got this facility that could work because. So we've got a job on our hands, sort of collating all that post consultation and working out what the options are. The kind of what really sort of caught my attention in what you said there was the kind of the separate sort of more confidential space. And one of the things that we're hearing really clearly in terms of what good outreach would need to be is, yes, you need you know, a big space for, you know, baby playtime or whatever the session, the class is, but then, you know, there are for a lot of particularly young mothers, that is a way into other services and to make potentially certain confidential disclosures to the service team, which then opens up a pathway to additional service provision. And that always requires a more confidential private space for those sorts of conversations. So that kind of facility is absolutely kind of the sort of arrangement that we need to be looking at.
Yeah, good. We're ahead of our time.
You are. Right, are there any more questions for Ben, please? No? Well, I'd just like to thank you, Ben, on behalf of members, for your presentation and your direct answers, and hopefully we'll all be responding to the consultation and making our points. So thank you very much indeed. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Right.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Stephanie, for being there as well.
Thank you, Ben.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Right. Sorry, just bear with me. I lost my screen now. Right. Item number 6 then on the agenda is an update on the Ship Street development. And I think, Andy, you're going to give us that presentation.
Yep. Hi, thanks, Jenny. Evening, councillors. I've got Simon Baxter here with me as well, who's our Chief Development Officer, who's going to assist with any technical questions as we get through. Let's see if I can share my screen, if I'm allowed. I'm not sure if it's actually enabled. Is James around?
Yeah, it should be, Andy.
Okay, yeah, got it. Hang on. Ship Street.
Yeah, that's looking good.
Right, from beginning. Can you see that?
Well, it says screen sharing, but can't see anything else at the
Yeah,
moment.
mine's currently frozen as well, so this is a cracking start. It says I'm sharing.
Modern technology.
Andy, it's saying you've started. I think it's trying to load onto our screens, but it's. Oh, here it is.
We got it.
We've got it.
Yeah.
Right, I can't see anyone either, so you'd have to bear with. Right, Ship Street development. This is a very exciting project which we're delighted to bring to you this evening and give you an update. Here's a little image of what it could look like. This is at the top of Bournemouth Road, looking through the site, and we'll come on to what the scheme might look like in a little bit. Start off with a little bit of history of the site. There's some nice images here. I'm not sure if any of you have seen these before, but it shows you just how industrial the site was back in 1956. And it's largely been derelict since then, and you'll see the newspaper article there, which is saying derelict sites should be usefully used, and that's from 1964. So some remediation took place at the site back in 2009 to 2011, and that was essentially so SGN could consider selling it. There wasn't a lot of interest at the time, and no offers were made. So given that lack of interest in the site, and given how important this area is to the regeneration of Folkestone, the council decided to buy the site in 2021 and bring it forward themselves. Now, there's a number of reasons I would suggest that the site has been derelict since sort of the 1960s, acknowledging some meanwhile uses. There's a lot of issues with the site. So starting off there with the cost of remediation. So whilst we've spoken already about some remediation was done previously, that was essentially to alleviate SGN of their responsibilities for the site and bring it forward for housing. But there's more work needs to be done. There's topography challenges across the site with different ground levels. I think there's something like a 12-metre variance from the top end to the bottom end of the site. There's existing service media on the site remaining from the use as gasworks. Huge retaining walls around the site, which most I'm sure are aware of. So stabilisation of those walls is required, and general improvement, if you like. It's concrete obstructions underground. It's gas governors, substation on site. And confirming the boundaries of the apparatus that's still there. And then, of course, the funding availability. And then on top of that, then we have to start looking at the feasibility and the cost versus income. So how much will the development be worth, essentially, and how much is it going to cost to build? And then, of course, lack of interest from the market. And we know that, obviously, from how long it's been derelict, but also we ran an exercise shortly after buying the site. And the intelligence that came back to us was we needed to de-risk the site in order for it to be attractive for developers. So there's a little plan there showing the topography of the site, and we spoke about 12 metres height difference. So you look at the top of the site there at Broadmead and Bournemouth Road, going down to Ford Road at the bottom, and that is sort of the general fall of the site. So it's very important that we use the topography of the site in bringing the development forward. And then there's a bit on the side there talking about a lot of it's made ground, so it has been built up at some of the previous capping, and that again causes us problems with foundations and how we build out the site. I will send these out obviously after the meeting, because I'm aware we are going to need to flick through it. So the work to date. So initially we started doing some capacity studies, which investigated the sort of density, the layout, public realm potential, and looking what the site, what we could put on there, essentially. The site maintenance to minimise future ecological risks, so keeping it maintained, and then of course viability studies. So we've looked at loads of different potential schemes to bring forward and what's going to be most viable. So obviously we've got low housing values in the area. We've got low local housing allowance rates. And obviously we've got a very expensive site to bring forward. So we've looked at loads of different tenure mixes, affordable housing, market sale housing, and how we might bring that forward. So it's really important that we've got to bring all of these things together to get a viable site. So that leads us on to very positive discussions with Homes England and One Public Estate. One Public Estate bring forward the Brownfield Land Release Fund, which we've been successful in another number of other projects within the district of obtaining that funding. So very positive engagement, and we are in the process of submitting a bid for funding to help with the remediation of the site. And again, very positive discussions with Homes England. That's led to some capacity funding being provided to us already. I think it was £60,000 to help us with the design of the scheme, and they are engaged, very engaged with the project and want to help bring that forward. So that's really, really positive. We've had 2 very well attended public engagement events, which have been incredibly positive. So the general feel that we're getting from that is people really want to see this site brought forward for housing. We've carried out condition surveys of the walls, so we know what work we have to do to those, and that's being costed. And we've done further soil and site investigation works, which is also being completed and costed. So we know roughly, we've got a range of what we're looking at for remediation of the site, and we've got a range of what we're looking at for the retaining walls and what we need to do there. So it's really important to understand those costs, coming back to the viability model and things like that. We've carried out market intelligence reports on future homes. So again, looking at the values, again, feeding into the viability, and then a lot of engagement with key stakeholders. So around the town, people like Creative Folkestone, who are helping bring forward the scheme, because you may be aware they've used the site extensively for the triennial over the last number of years. And last year was the first year they opened up the site and people were allowed in the site, and they had a number of installations there, which was very successful. And we've more recently appointed a design team to achieve planning consent. So that's a professional team consisting of Arup, who are the professional consultants, and Fletcher Priest, who are the architect team, and they're working hard together to bring forward the scheme with us now. So this was, let's say, we've carried out two engagement events, one of which was the week before last. So we haven't collated the information from that yet, but it was very positive. And this was a sort of summary of the feedback from the first event, which we took place last March. So you see, I won't read them all out, but essentially carbon efficient homes, affordable homes to rent and buy. These percentages here represent the percentage of people who are either agreed or strongly agreed in our range of answers. So 92% of people wanted energy efficient homes. 87% of people wanted affordable homes on the site. The scheme should have public amenity and created space, improving the security of the area, prioritising the site for high quality homes for families, and incentivising residents to use public transport, cycling and car clubs. It was all very positive. And from that, this was kind of the emerging design that we used at that consultation. So this had come about from previous studies, and it was very important for us to be able to link the site from the train station down to the town centre, the harbour, because it is actually the quickest way to walk, but nobody walks that way currently. So if we could, again, and this is difficult because we've got the massive level changes at the top there, but if we can somehow create this green link through the site, which will be essentially car free apart from a couple of crossing points, and then a local plaza at the end, sort of animate the area down at the bottom of Ford Road, we can really help regenerate the area. So that's kind of where it started. Excuse me. And then we go on to the proposal. So it's very much a residential led scheme, embracing walking and cycling links from the station to the town centre that we just spoke about, and looking at how we do that using the site topography, and obviously how we generate housing that is both attractive, suitable for what we need in the district, but also has a marketability about it. We need a scheme that we can afford to build, and one that is attractive to the market. So we've been very keen not to steer this in a particular way. So we can flex, for example, the number of affordable units or the number of market sale units, and the scheme is very much designed around that and designed around the public realm, this walking route through the centre and having the plaza at the bottom, but very much using the topography of the site and considering the views through the site, the local environment. Obviously, you've got the views of the downs, you've got the views of the viaduct, and it's really important to embrace all of those things. So this is some imagery of what that might look like. So obviously the house types will differ from this, but this is to give an indication of sort of scale and massing of the site. So you'll see the flats at the top end towards Bournemouth Road, and then going down through the site, sort of parallel with Ship Street, if you like, more standard house typologies with duplexes on the corners of those units, and then terrace houses in the centre, and then going down to the bottom of the site around the plaza with another small flatted area with houses running down the hill there, with the plaza there, with potentially some commercial space on the bottom. Now that might be live work units for artists, or it could be a small cafe. The early engagement showed that people around the area didn't want a lot of commercial space, so we've minimized that on the site, but we think it's important to have a cafe or some live work artistic space down on the plaza to sort of animate that area, and that's what we're going to try and do. So here's an image of the public realm and what that might look like. And again, you can see the house typologies there with the duplex units on the corners going into the terrace streets. And this green link is really important. I mean, this is 16 meters wide, so it's a big space. And that's going to be increase the biodiversity, lots of planting, lots of trees, integrated play into the landscape using the slope, potentially for slides and things like that for children. So whether we've got Radnor Park up at the top, so we're not planning on creating a park here, but what we do want is shared public amenity space, which is pleasant to walk through and increases the biodiversity of the site. And here's a few images here. You'll recognise Payers Park there, of one way of animating the slope, if you like, and how you deal with the level changes. And there's some other images of steps and green walkways through other developments. And that's very much the sort of feel that we want to achieve as we go through the design process. And of course, we come on to sustainability. So these are the sort of principles that we are designing the scheme to. And again, I won't read them all, but things that you'd expect to see. So high fabric performance of the building, that's the most important thing we can do with the buildings at the moment. We don't really know what the future holds for energy. And what we're going to be putting in our houses in 20 years' time, but to future-proof that by getting the fabric of the building right, getting the orientation of the buildings right, so they don't overheat, but they're efficient to heat. So we talk about the biodiversity and urban greening there, so we've touched upon that with the green link and the rest of the site. Using air source heat pumps, there'll be no gas on site. And obviously other technologies such as solar photovoltaics, so the homes will be super efficient and cheap to heat, essentially. And then looking at active travel, every house will have cycle storage, electrical vehicle, every house, will have cycle storage, and we'll be looking to install suitable electrical vehicle charging points across the site. So here's next steps. So we're working through the design process now. That will conclude later in spring. Concurrently with that, we are applying for the Brownfield Land Release Fund. That has to be in at the end of this month, and that will provide hopefully the lion's share of the funding towards remediating the site and help with our viability. Planning submission will be the summer this year, with the planning decision expected later in late autumn, winter, and then we'll be looking and bringing a report back to Cabinet about bring the site forward. Now, whether that's the council bringing it forward itself or with a development partner, or talking to other developers about whether they would want to build the site out and we take some of the affordable housing back, or a registered provider brings forward the social housing. That's really sort of up for discussion at the moment, and depends on the financial situation of the council later next year, what interest rates are doing. There's a lot of variables at the moment, as you'll all be aware, with the war in Ukraine, energy prices, interest rates, and whether it's best for the council to bring this forward or someone else to bring it forward. But what will have happened is that we will have facilitated the regeneration of that area by the commitment that the council has made to that site already. And there's an image from Ford Road of looking up at the site with the plaza there at the bottom. And I'm not saying that's not exactly what it's going to look like, but it's an artist's impression. So happy to take any questions. We'll go back to it.
Thank you very much indeed, Andy. Have we got any questions? Martin.
Yes, thank you for that presentation. Just one thing what I've observed where the different levels and the steps, in considerations for accessibility, people with wheelchairs, etc., etc. So is in that plan with them levels that sort of a consideration?
It is, of course, a consideration. It's very difficult with the height change that we've got to do that from Bournemouth Road. There's 2 other access points from Ship Street into the site and access points from Ford Road into the site. So from the top end of the site, our current thinking at the moment is to have a viable scheme. If you were in a wheelchair, you would have to access from Ship Street. Because I mean, we're working through it. If we can achieve it, we will do. But we think with the level changes that we've got, there will have to be steps and ramps. So we can't just. The slope is basically will be too high, and the gradient not DDA compliant. So a DDA compliant route will be from Ship Street, but we are doing everything we can to see if that can be delivered.
Just to say, it will be DDA compliant from Ship Street, and we are working hard to make sure that there's a 1 in 20. It's 1 in 20 we need to achieve, and we think we can do that. We've done a bit more design development since this slide presentation was put together, and we think we're more or less there as far as that's concerned.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any more questions? I attended the first exhibition, but unfortunately I couldn't make the second one, but I know the first one was very positive. Just a question, Andy, I just wonder, is there any way that this might be connected up to the levelling up bid that works that we're doing there? Would it be able to connect at all?
It's not connected up in the way of the levelling up bid funding any of this.
No,
the levelling up bid was for specific interventions, but it's very closely linked and ties in with the place plan and the general regeneration of Folkestone.
Okay, thank you. That's what I thought. Yeah.
Chair, yes, I've got my little hand up.
Sorry, Roger, I didn't see that. It wasn't that little.
You can't expect the architect not to have something to say. But no, I think this has always been a fantastic, exciting site to deal with, isn't it? It's really fantastic. And it just occurs to me, I mean, I know we tried to respect the setting and the form of what's around and all the rest of it. But if anything, I think some of it looks a little bit pedestrian in a way. And I just wondered, you've talked about the views and the connection from Radnor Park and views looking at it from Broadmead Road and so on. What you didn't mention, and it didn't occur to me at the pop-in sessions either, how high would you have to go to be able to get a view of the sea and a panoramic view of the town? Because if you need to increase your density, one super duper tall building on there might give quite a few attractive flats that would look over the viaduct down on into the sea and everything else, and that'd be a bit of a landmark, bit of a beacon, directing you to the site. Just a thought.
Yeah, thank you. We've had
a bit late for that now, I should think.
Yeah, well, no, it's very interesting, Roger. We've had a lot of discussions about height and how high we might go with some of the buildings, and a lot of it is coming down. And obviously, you'll be aware of this: the higher you go, the higher the build costs of your building are. And I'll let Simon come in at the moment because he's probably far more eloquent than I am on this. But we want to keep the buildings under 18 meters essentially for various reasons, one of them being build costs, obviously other ones being building safety.
Escape issues at 18 meters, haven't you, as well?
Yeah. But I'll let Simon come in to offer his opinions on that.
Just a thought. I mean, don't labour it now. I mean, it's probably a bit late as well, but we always have these crazy visions, don't we, us architects?
So I think there's probably, I won't go into a huge amount of detail, but there are two headline issues that we've got to be very mindful of in terms of three headline issues in terms of density. One is car parking ratios and car parking requirements. Even at the numbers that we've got, we are not going to be policy compliant in terms of the car parking that we're proposing, and that's going to be something that we need to sort of negotiate through the process, and we've had a good dialogue with the planners about that. It's 5 minutes from the station, it's close to the city centre, so people can walk into the city centre. So there are some good arguments in terms of the car parking, but equally, it's very clear from the consultation that we did that people think the car parking ratios ought to reflect existing levels of car ownership in the area, which are not especially high for the folks in the Hythe area, but they are significant. So that's kind of the balance we're trying to strike. The second thing, as Andy mentioned, is the building safety issues, and as an architect, I'm sure, Roger, you're aware of these. That has come out of there's emerging legislation about fire protection in relation to building heights, particularly over 18 metres, where once you go over 18 metres, you're almost certainly looking at a second staircase, which then undermines the amount of building that you can get on the site. And it also introduces additional complexities. So there's quite a good rationale for us trying to stay below the 18-metre limit. And the third reason is we are having informal dialogue with developers as we go along. And one of the things that the Countryside, who are a big developer in well, nationally really, but have got some interest in this site and might be somebody that we might look to pop down the road. They've said that they've suggested that in terms of construction issues, it would be preferable to stay below ground plus 5 stories, and if we can manage that, then we will see a benefit in terms of the build cost per square meter, and that's an important factor for us. So I think that those are the sort of 3 headline reasons why we are where we are, and why we don't think putting a tall building will help us in this situation.
Thank you very much. Frank, I think you got your hand up.
Thank you, Jenny. It's only a quick question. What didn't appear, I didn't see anywhere. How many units were actually going to be proposed on the site?
Sorry, yeah, I was just thinking that actually, as we were talking about the last question. We're aiming for about 150. I think the current is that we've changed around the parking to a little bit more recently. I think we're on 146 units, so it's going to be around 146, 150 units. With our viability modelling, we looked at ranges from 100 units up to 200, maybe even. And we'd had conversations with our architects about having a whole flatter development, with much higher unit numbers on that. We think 150-ish is about the right mix, and basically from a viability point of view, just about makes it work. As I say, there's a lot of costs associated with the site, so we have to get the unit numbers right. So then it helps pay for the abnormal costs associated with the site.
Thank you, Andy. I think Paul, you have your hand up.
I think Laszlo had his hand up first.
After you.
Okay.
Don't argue. Don't argue.
I'm not going to. So very briefly, and if I may, so the Brownfield Land Release Fund, is that going to fund all of the preparation work that you've identified in the slide? Is that how that's going to be used?
It will be used to bring the site forward, to get it ready for a development partner in whatever form that might take. So we don't know quite if it will be enough. We've got to see how much we get awarded. We have a range from our site investigation work and the remediation strategy, which will be put together through the design process when we know exactly where all the site levels are, how we're going to move things, how we're going to deal with the site, and where the buildings, the footprints are going to be, etc. And we know exactly where everything is going, then we can design the remediation strategy. All of that, the remediation of the site is being taken into account in how we design the site, because obviously if we have a huge cut and fill exercise, we don't want to be removing huge amounts of material from site. We want to deal with the site levels as best we can, and then have layers of capping, so we don't add to the expense. So we've got a range of costs, and if it comes in mid-range, the Brownfield Land Fund, if we get what we're applying for, should cover that cost. But then there's also other abnormal costs associated with the site, the walls. That's going to be a substantial investment, and also how we deal with the public realm, because obviously we want to build this green link and deal with the level changes across the site and increase the accessibility to and through the site, and open it up to the, rather than just leaving the walls all the way around it and having it as a walled sort of gated community. We want to enhance and regenerate the whole area. So by opening up the site to people flowing through the site, that's what we want to achieve. But obviously that also brings with it a cost, and how we do that. And we had went through the tender process for the architects. We had some amazing designs put in front of us, including Spanish steps and Lisbon elevators, and they looked absolutely fantastic. But we did have to bring ourselves back a little bit here, because if we end up with a scheme that costs £60 million through our design process, we're never going to be able to build it. So there's a lot of commerciality in the thinking about bringing it forward, but there are high abnormal costs.
Oh, thank you for that. And of course, a 12-metre drop be very popular with the skateboarders coming from F51 heading up. They come flying along there. Thank you very much, Andy.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Laszlo, sorry, Laszlo, I missed you.
Andy and Simon, the whole thing looks fantastic. I just missed a couple of things regarding materials. Did we touch on that?
No.
Materials don't.
We could, so what we are likely to.
I mean, is it actually design and build then, or?
The procurement method will be is something that we're actively talking about now in terms of how it gets delivered. We really want to attract substantial private sector investment, so we have it because it's unlikely that the council is really going to be able to have the resources to be able to fund the development itself. So it's very important that we bring forward a design that's going to be attractive to private investors, partners, whether that's house builders or regeneration companies or pension vehicles or whatever that might be. And the exact how that might transpire is we might look at doing a joint venture where we retain some of the equity in the site, but sell an interest in the site to a private developer. We might sell the whole site, and as Andy said, I think at the start, just to look to have the affordable housing as council provision.
I was just trying to find out who's leading the design.
The designers are, the architect is Fletcher Priest, and they're working in a partnership with Ove Arup and partners, who are a sort of big engineering-led consultancy.
So it could end up being design and build, presumably, to your criteria.
It could be. Well, it sounds like you've got some experience historically of design and build contracts, and I can't imagine as letting a design and build contract unless the council was entirely funding the development, and I can't imagine where the council will get the money from to entirely fund the development on its own. So I think it might be a design and build.
You can set the criteria, I guess.
Yeah, it might be design and build, I suppose, if via a joint venture that could happen. But that's, I think, something to be decided as the scheme unfolds, and we're having informal dialogues as we go through this phase of the development with potential partner investors, and very much looking to try and address the things that will make it attractive to them as we go along.
Okay. So I think it's very worth much noting that the early market engagement suggested that we needed to de-risk the site. So that is very much our project at the moment. So it's understanding what's there. So we've done that. We've got the site investigation works done. We've done the survey works for the walls. We're applying for funding. we're getting the planning consent.
Yeah,
And then
yeah.
all the options, the way we're bringing the site forward, all the options are open to us. But I mean, let's be honest, this is a large.
I guess, sorry, I guess you can you can sort of create a design intent. If you've got that ability, then you can just create a design intent and let it out as design and build as a safe option or a less riskier option. But
yeah, it all depends on the situation. Okay, it's a large scale development. It will need external funding. Now, as Simon's sort of alluded to, if we can do that through a joint venture and we have a controlling interest in the site, that would be really great.
Is there a loose-ish cost plan?
Yeah. We've done a lot of viability testing, and as I say, going through the process that we're doing now by de-risking the site, bringing the government funding in to remediate the site should get us to a point where we have a positive land value, which is what's been holding the site back for the last 50, 60 years, because because of the cost associated with bringing it forward, nobody stepped in to do that. And that's what we're doing. So we're transforming that by bringing it forward, doing the work that we need to do to de-risk it and make it an attractive proposition, either for ourselves or for another developer.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Laszlo. Thank you, Andy. Any further questions? No. Well, thank you very much indeed, Andy and Simon. I think, well, I mean, I'm obviously very well aware of the project. Excellent. I mean, I think it's a site that's been there forever, and if we can do something about it and make it more attractive for the area, it can only be good. So thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Jenny.
Thank you.
Right. Okay, thank you. Don't go, Andy, will you? Because you're.
No, I know you've got me again. I'll apologise in advance.
I will go, however.
Okay, thank you, Simon.
I'm not involved with this, so thank you very much.
Thank you, Simon.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Bye.
I didn't want you to disappear, Andy. No. Item 7 is the Coast Drive Coastal Destination Project, and I know that's another one close to your heart, Andy.
Yeah, this is kind of a toss-up between which one is my favourite scheme at the moment. But these two are definitely my two favourite projects at the council. So I will share again. I'll try and keep it brief because I'll be aware that some of you probably haven't had dinner yet. I haven't either. So, so let me just find it. Ship Street. So it's not coming up on here. So I'll be with you. I'll be there in a second. I've just got those other ones down. Sorry, it's not coming up on my screen. There we go.
Right, we can see it.
Is that working? Happy
days.
Yes,
fine, thank you.
Right, super. So Coast Drive Coastal Destination Project. Now I know some of you are definitely aware of this. We started looking at this a couple of years ago after the success of the regeneration of the Folkestone beach huts, which I'm sure a lot of you are aware of being incredibly successful after we basically completely almost started from scratch. I think we refurbished about 35 to 40 of the existing huts, the better quality ones, and then put in 80 new huts. But we also did a lot of infrastructure improvements at the steps. We put ramps in for accessible access, and completely sort of transformed the area. Now that, as I say, we let the huts out almost immediately, all of them, and we have in the region of 700 to 800 people, I think, on the waiting list. So it was clear that there was appetite, if you like, for people to have beach huts in the area. So we started looking at other areas where we could put them in. I remember probably about two and a half years ago, we came down to Coast Drive and we had some funding made available to put in circa 100 beach huts. But when we came down to Coast Drive to scope out the site, we thought we could offer far more than just putting in beach huts. So we went back and had a play around with what we thought we could do, spoke to a few people, and then we took a project, a much wider project in scope, back to Cabinet to approve some funding, because we wanted to include and make it much more of a coastal destination project. And there's a number of reasons for that, and we'll come on to that in a minute. But essentially, we thought we could deliver much more. There are a lot of water sports people operating in the area. As you'll know, all that coastline around there is a triple SI. So it's how we could bring this into one area, bring interest into the area, tourism, and how we could increase trade for the local businesses and things like that. So there's an image of the site there. I'm sure most of you know where it is. It's located on the east side of Coast Drive. It's currently a very underutilized car park. And I use the term car park loosely. It's a fairly rough surface, which does need improving. It's adjacent to the Littlestone Green and the Sea Cadets, and then you've got the Varn Boat Club and the RNLI Centre on the other side. As touched upon already, as you'll be aware, it's a triple SI. There's a couple of photographs of the site. So the left photograph there, you'll see the Varn Boat Club in the distance to the left. And then the photo in the centre, you just make out the cadet hut in grey there. And then the photo on the right is the rather potholed entrance. So we want to tidy all of that up as part of the project. So the project aims, which we've kind of touched upon already, enhancing and encouraging tourism and businesses by creating a high quality destination centre, improving local infrastructure and public facilities, and helping to manage visitor footfall, particularly water sports areas. We're very much aware that particularly kite surfing is very popular in the area, depending on the wind direction. And I think if the wind changes direction, everyone tends to come up from Camber and go around the Greatstone areas. And that, of course, causes damage, possibly inadvertently. People don't mean to do it, I would have thought, but inadvertently creates damage to the triple SI, with things getting trampled and things like that. So we thought if we could focus those sort of sports activities in this area, that could benefit the much wider triple SI in the area. And then also promoting inclusive access and facilities. I'll come on to that a little bit more at the moment, but there's very few areas in the district where people in a wheelchair or people with mobility issues can get onto the beach and then have other facilities where they can go for the day and enjoy the beach and enjoy the area. So coming on to the proposal, so we looked at creating this new visitor hub. So a building, so this started off, the initial thought started off as it would be great to have a little cafe concession there with some outdoor seating, and then speaking to various stakeholders around the area, the town council, Magnox, and other people in the area, the water sports concessions that operate around the area. It very quickly became evident that we could do far more than that. And if we could create an educational space with changing rooms and showers, then the water sports businesses might be able to sort of really pick up. And particularly about having that education space, people can apply for funding then and become sort of a teaching centre. So the cafe concession with outdoor seating was kind of a staple. You can come down there, obviously have a coffee, a snack. Public toilets with outdoor and indoor showers, so people using the beach can use the outdoor showers, people using the classroom and the more formal facilities have that indoor changing space. And then we've recently also applied for changing places funding for 3 toilets across the district. So for those of you who are not aware, changing places toilets are essentially it's going up from you've got your disabled toilets already, and this is taking it a step further, where it gives adults with severe impairment, if you like, it gives them a place where they can go and get changed. So you have lift hoists in there and full-size changing tables, etc. So people, disabled adults, can go and have somewhere where they can get changed and use the facilities, because we often hear this, that there aren't that many facilities around. And we've been successful in the funding for 3 changing places toilets, which we're absolutely delighted about. And one of them is going to be here within this facility. We've got another one which we're going to build at the Coastal Park in Folkestone. And then we've got funding for another one for Folkestone Town Centre in the Folker building. So that's really, really good news. And then we're going to have beach huts that are going to be accessed from a boardwalk. So this boardwalk is going to go right across the front of the site, with further boardwalks running off that parallel onto the beach to provide, again, full accessibility for everybody. We're going to tidy up the car park with new permeable surfaces, and then have designated disabled park and EV charging points, and then facilities for 2 local water sports businesses that we've actually already got operating out of containers in the car park. So here's an artist impression of what that might look like. So the building footprint won't exactly look like this, but this was to give a feel of that area and what we intend to bring forward. So you might have seen this already, but we think it's quite a nice image. So here's a plan of the area. So you'll see there to the sort of top right of the image where the entrance is, and then you come in there. That will all be tidied up with formal surfacing, so that the whole hatched area is intended to be a permeable hard surface, with formalised parking, with the remainder of the site there. So sort of the other 3/5, if you like, whatever that is, regraded with road stone, so it's a much better surface to park on. And then the plan is to have 2 rows of beach huts, as you'll see there, which are offset, with the boardwalk running right along the front, with the jetties coming out. And then what will happen between those jetties is there'll be fencing to protect you've got a crest there, for those of you that are familiar with it, which is where all the native plants grow, and the bits that need protecting. So we think if we fence off those areas, it stops them being trampled and will actually increase what is there now, because to be fair, there's not a great deal there now at the moment, but if we can fence that off and prepare it, it will increase the biodiversity of the area. And then you'll see the visitor hub there down in the bottom right of the image, adjacent to the cadet hut. These are the plans that we've had drawn up for the building. So you'll essentially see it's 2 buildings. So you've got the educational space and the concession with the changes, places, toilet. That's surrounded by a boardwalk with the outdoor dining area. And then to the left of the image there shows the all of the other facilities, so the toilets, and the showers, locker rooms, etc. So funding wise, the council have put up 890, or just shy of £900,000 of funding, which is in our approved capital programme. And we have secured Magnox funding of 300,000. That is subject to our planning consent. And we've got £35,000 from Changes Places grant. Now we've just done a very detailed cost plan of the scheme. Which has come in above that budget, which is, I guess, to be expected with everything that's going on at the moment, when we sort of commenced this 2 years ago and started looking at it. So we need to look at some value engineering or bringing in some more. It's not a huge amount over, but we do need to bring some more funding in or look at how we phase the project. But we're still very keen to bring it forward. So next steps, the planning application has been submitted. We're working through that with planners at the moment. So the principle of non-residential development has been accepted by the planners, but because the site is designated in a local plan for residential, but the footprint of this would not interfere with that. And beach huts, of course, are a temporary structure, although we are looking at this as a long-term development to really sort of create that visitor experience in the area. So, as I say, feedback from the planning officers has been generally really positive. There's been a few improvements and alterations that have been requested. KCC ecology comments are relating to biodiversity, we're sort of addressing that now. So there needs to be biodiversity net gain, but ironically, because it's a triple SI, we can't demonstrate net gain on the triple SI, so it has to be off-site. So we're looking at options for that now, and other options around sort of the New Romney area and what we can do elsewhere to offset that. Although we are looking to increase the biodiversity of the site as well by protecting that crest and the rare plants that will grow there. So essentially, we're hoping that planning permission will be granted basically in spring, and then we're working through the other elements at the moment, and then hopefully we'll be able to go out with a design and build contract later in the year. And I will stop sharing.
Thank you, Andy. Have we got any questions? Oh, Paul?
Yeah, thank you, Andy. Yeah, I think it was over 2 years ago when we sat down with you and started talking about the toilet block changes. So yeah, it was of that era. I mean, New Norwich Town Council Planning Environment Committee recommended unanimously to support this application. We did have a couple of comments, which some of which you've alluded to in terms of them being accepted by planning in terms of the local plan, you know, RM11, and we requested that change from residential to leisure/tourism to protect the site from the future. And again, I think, you know, we're very pleased with the way it's laid out. It doesn't conflict with what we already provide in the area in terms of beach huts, because we're looking at two very different markets, Andy, as you know, following on from the discussions we'd had previously. We did have a couple of other comments which we haven't had any feedback yet, and that's to do with protecting the interests of the Sea Cadets establishment there. And the fact that they currently have 6 protected parking places to allow them to bring in adults, you know, who are actually running the unit, and they need that, you know, every day of the week at different times and things. So it's not insurmountable. I mean, it's all doable. It's just a matter of, you know, how do we make sure we protect that, because they've been through a difficult time. There's no two ways about it, like most youth organisations, and they're just in the point of building their unit back up again now. So we wouldn't want to have anything which would be seen to impact, particularly having if there was difficulty in getting youth leaders along to that as well. As you alluded to, I mean, our existing beach huts and winch sites do provide boat access across the Triple SI, and we have permission to do that as part of that. And I know in the submission you talked about, you know, working with the Crown Estates, for example, to do with the front edge of that development. And we've been working, as you're well aware, with the windsurfing with people. So we're really pleased that we're able to accommodate their needs on that site. And again, I think with the Triple SI and the ecology side of things, if there's something that we can do, you know, working together with New Romney Town Council, we'd be more than happy to help with that. So I think for me, it's very positive. On the planning application, when we dealt with it, there were only two resident comments at that time. One was positive and one wasn't, but it wasn't particularly negative in terms of things that related to planning. It was associated with loss of amenity and people's views. Sorry. So again, you know, we're very supportive in New Romney of this proposal, Andy, and just really pleased that it's got where it has, and just hope that you know, if additional funding is required, it can be found rather than cut the scheme back. So that's all I'd like to say. Just very pleased that it is what it is, Andy. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Paul, and thank you. Obviously, we've spoken a fair bit about this, and thank you for your support. And it's been very important to get a scheme that complements what's already there. Just for your interest, we're one of my chief officers is meeting with the chair of the cadets tomorrow on site to discuss a few issues. And incidentally as well, there is no actual formal agreement for the parking, but I will look to formalise this through the process, and I'm more than happy to provide parking permits for 6 spaces or whatever they need to help smooth that through. But yeah, there is no record of any formal agreement, put it that way, but I've got no problem with it.
I think you'll be shown a letter tomorrow from Sheffield District Council. Is that okay? So
maybe, but
brace yourself.
There's nothing on our files anywhere. So.
Okay. All right, no, thanks, Andy.
Yeah, we have no problem with it. It's fine.
Thank you very much. Well, obviously, I mean, the beach huts in Folkestone, you've got a long waiting list. So I'm assuming you'd have the same at the coast there.
We hope so. Yeah. We hope. Well, this is even better because you've got all the other. I mean, obviously, you've got the Folkestone, you've got the facilities in the coastal park, but this is the changing places, toilet, the cafe, and everything else, the boardwalk and everything. It's just going to pull it all together really nicely, and we're really excited about it.
Yeah, and in actual fact, they have better facilities there, won't they?
Yes.
Or more, you know, closer facilities anyway, and if not better.
Yeah, well, certainly equivalent.
Yes, absolutely. No further questions to
Councillor Sweeney's got his hand up.
Yeah, Martin. Oh, sorry, Terry. I'll come back to you in a minute.
Yeah, that's because I've been asleep all time. I haven't actually.
Oh.
all I wanted to say is that it's excellent, and I speak as a marsh councillor. This is what we're all about on the marsh. It's tourism and attractive places to go to, and Coast Drive development will fit in nicely, exactly where it's proposed and where it is. In fact, you know, I've gone along there hundreds of times and stopped in the car park and wandered up onto the seafront. It's really attractive, and I think it will attract tourists, even if it's only for the one day, of course. But it's great. I can't see anything wrong with it. It attract a lot more, and it makes. We've got to bear in mind this is a seaside location, and therefore it's nice to have places that look like seaside attractions rather than a block of flats, and this is it. That's all I wanted to say, Chairman.
Thank you, Terry. Terry, I'm just wondering why you've got 44742 on your screen.
This is all to do with my identity, and it came up last time when the thing was flapping all over the place, and it can stay there for a while.
Okay, thank you. No, Martin, sorry, Martin.
Yeah, yeah, thank you for that. I think it's a great idea. I mean, it will bring tourism and everything into the coast, New Romney, and down the coast towards Dungeness. So one concern I have, are you, just a question, are you in contact with the Littlestone lifeboat station on this project? Because, right, okay, because that's really important, because obviously on their shouts and rescues they would need channeling. Obviously, you know, if there's activity around there, that needs to be a thought process if you're going to invite other organisations like windsurfers, etc., kite service. Me being once a crew member there, I know the perils and trying to get launched very quickly. So that's one consideration I would hope that you have looked down.
Yeah,
or contacted.
Thank you. Yeah, we're aware. They're aware of us, and we're aware of them. And obviously, we've got people operating in the area already. And obviously, Councillor Rolfe has been very supportive of the project also, and I believe her husband works there.
Okay.
Volunteer.
Yeah, it's just making sure that you have that conversation, because then, you know, if there's activity, they need to know. They might have to put things in place. Okay,
yeah,
cool.
We'll do that.
Thank you very much indeed, Andy. Thank you very much.
Sorry, Chairman. Oh. I did have one other question actually, if I may, just to make Andy here while he's aware. In our parish highway improvement plan, Andy, we had a number of residents who've asked for a pedestrian crossing of some description to come from that car park area so that people can access the shops across the road safely. It is something that we've got in our plan at the moment. We haven't had a discussion about that particular area of KCC highways yet, because it's not in our top 5 priorities. But that's just to make you aware, really, that it is something that has been looked at, because we have had 2 serious accidents along that road in the last 3 years. In accordance with crash, we had no fatalities, but people do speed along there. So if the footfall from that area to the local shops is going to increase, which is what we hope it's going to do, then we need to be looking at that as well. So as I say, we've got that in our highway improvement plan at the moment. So it's just something to be aware of, Andy, that's all.
Well, no, that's useful to know. And if you do have dialogue with KCC, I'll be interested to know how that goes, because whenever I've tried to get pedestrian crossings put in anywhere, I haven't been very successful. And incidentally, we're going to be talking to them, and I'm hoping this will be successful. Because what we did when we were talking about Ship Street previously, Ford Road is crying out for some traffic calming down there, and we'd very much like to create a safer, enhanced route into the town from there. So obviously it's slightly outside of the scope of our initial project, but we are going to be picking that up with KCC, and they're doing a lot of work for us on the traffic improvements for the levelling up fund. So we're hoping that the influence through that might sort of spill over into some other projects. So I'll keep you posted if I have any success.
That's working together. Good partnership working. Yeah.
Trying.
Thank you, Andy. Thank you very much indeed. And thank you, everybody, for attending.
Could I just bring up one or two things, Jenny?
Of course, Frank.
We put forward some items for the agenda which didn't come forward, but James has, and I hope he sent it out to everybody, there was answers to the questions that we'd put, has come back. James was, I hoped, was going to send it to every member, whether he has.
I haven't actually done that yet, but I can do.
Yeah, okay, thank you, James. Second thing is that this will be the last meeting before the elections. And the next meeting is due to be in July. So I'd like to thank everybody who's been here for the last however many years it's been, 3 or 4 since COVID, for what they've done. And hope that most of you are still there come July. Who knows? And the third thing is, before we disappear, James, if I could stay and have a quick word with Mike before we both disappear.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you, Frank. And you've taken the words out of my mouth. I was just going to say, thank you to everybody over the last 4 years for their efforts and for the work that they've been doing. It's been an interesting, we've had some interesting sessions, and good luck to everybody who's standing for election or re-election or whatever. So yes, thank you very much indeed. Okay, and nothing else, say good night.
Okay,
thank you very much.
Jenny.
Thank you.
Okay, bye now.
Sorry,
Bye-bye.
did you say something, Fred? All right.